Right, so welcome to the TechPulse Healthcare podcast. This is actually episode 10. So we've made it into double figures now, Jonathan. So,
wow. I didn't realise.
Indeed, we made it. But yeah. So as always, I'm here, and Jonathan with me to co-host this podcast, and we're very honoured to have with us Professor Bob Stone. I was just told to call you Bob, I know, but I'll introduce you formally at the start. So, Bob, I mean, I was looking into some of your background just today, as you recommended some sites, and you know, really, you really are, I think, and I would call an XR pioneer. You know, almost 40-year career spanning defence, healthcare, space, and heritage applications. And really, you know, and Bob is Emeritus Professor of Extended Realities and Human-Centered Design at the University of Birmingham, and an independent consultant, chartered psychologist as well, and fellow of the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. And in 2024, he was inducted into the Augmented Worlds Expo, the AWE XR Hall of Fame, and is the only British or European person, I'm told, among the first 10 inductees. So yeah, I'm really proud and honored to have you on this podcast with us, to add some of your great experience.
It's a great pleasure, absolute great pleasure.
Yeah, it's really hard to know where to start. I mean, you seem to have been doing this XR business for long before anyone else even knew what it was. And so, how did you start your journey into this and defence and NASA and all this?
It's a long story, so I'll cut it as painlessly short as I can. I was working as a human factors specialist at British Aerospace, as was in Filton, Bristol. And as a result of some contract work that we managed to land with the European Space Agency, part of that was me going over to a conference in Maryland, at which I met a wonderful guy called Steve Ellis, Dr. Steve Ellis. And he just invited me over to NASA Ames, their research, the Human Factors Research Lab, or Human Behavior Research Lab in San Francisco. So I nipped over there whilst I was doing the rounds and giving a talk on our work on telepresence. They put me in this crazy headset and put on this bulky, crazy glove, and that was it. Career change. The experience, even though it was simple wireframe graphics, I mean, nothing like we've got today, but the illusion of movement, the perception of going up that wireframe escalator. I thought to myself, this is fantastic. I love this tech. But the important thing was these guys were doing it from a human factors perspective, which has stayed with me all the time, even throughout, in particular with the medical work, the research I've done. So I came back to the UK, couldn't get British Aerospace interested, strangely enough. So then managed to get myself employed by the National Robotics Research Centre up in Salford, and that's where I was given what would be, even today, be considered quite an amazing budget to get something started in telepresence and virtual reality. And that's it in a very small nutshell.
Oh, and you mentioned human factors. That's where you started out, kind of life, and then moved on. What is human factors?
After doing a degree in psychology, I went on to do a master's in ergonomics, and basically ergonomics, human factors, is all about the study of the human in his or her working environment. That is the most basic definition. So it's everything from cognitive psychology to physiology to anatomy to systems engineering, bringing human engineering and engineering together to make life more acceptable to the end users.
Right, and you had a BBC appearance as well, did you? Something on the BBC.
Yeah, I that was whilst I was working at British Aerospace, because I played in a brass band, and I still love music, but I played in a couple of brass bands in Bristol. I was invited to become a DJ, God help me, on BBC's Radio Bristol's On Parade programme, which is great fun, absolute fantastic. I mean, my radio skills or what have you are rubbish. So it lasted for a year, but it was quite nice. I think that may be one of the BBC things that I mentioned, but also I think the one you're probably focusing on was the BBC appearance in
93, I think.
1993, 90, yeah. And that was quite important for us, because that was whilst we were at the Robotics Centre, and this thing called virtual reality was beginning to pervade through the UK, courtesy of Virtuality Limited over in Leicester. It was the gaming side of things, and BBC came to us. We had just literally invested in a Provision, which is a transputer-based system developed by a Bristol company called Division at the time, and a headset and glove from the US, and they filmed us interacting with a very crude model of a Rolls-Royce jet engine. But the thing was, when that went out, we were getting in contact by all kinds of industries, large and small, saying that's the first time we've seen this VR thing on telly, where you're not shooting up pterodactyls, or you're not pretending to fly in a Harrier jump jet shooting down others. So you're telling us that it's got some efficacy in industry. And that launched this initiative. We brought initially 12 companies together with no academic funding, no government funding, and launched this initiative where the companies could be kept informed of VR, but importantly also able to sponsor a small, I suppose you call it a suck it and see project, to see if virtual reality did have some future potential for them. And that was highly successful in terms of getting VR accepted as more than just a computer game.
Wow, that's really cool. Another story that I've come across with you is to do with being an honorary Cossack in Russia. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was again during the Robotics Centre, as that came to an end, and they were contemplating spinning us off as an independent company, which happened. But I was at a conference where I was talking about different applications. I mentioned space, and there was this Russian guy in the audience, and he said, "Well, would you like to work with us? You know, we haven't got any money, story of my life, but could you help us put together a VR model of the Mir space station, as was at the time?" So we did that, and it was very, very successful. I mean, I've actually still got the software. It runs crazily fast on today's PCs. But as a result of donating them time and effort and assistance, they made me an honorary Cossack and a professor of the South Russia Technical State University. And an academician, which was a real honor at the time. And I've kept in touch with the guys over there ever since, apart from recently because of the world situation. But it was again, it's like the healthcare side of things. Healthcare is something that I pursued since the 90s, and the space thing has finally come full circle. And I've been working with a European company literally over the last couple of months in the area of virtual reality for early astronaut training.
Wow. And so I started myself into, I did a VR project and I put it on, and then I was hooked about 5-6 years ago. And I read some of your things around that people just take the technology sometimes and they just kind of use it and without thinking about, I always say there's three things. There's like people, processes, and systems, right? And people just take the system part of it and go with it and forget about the people. And the change is massive, and then it keeps. I've even now, after I look at how long you've been doing it, and now I feel a bit embarrassed after after a few years, but it's still, things haven't moved. The things I was saying 5 years ago, I'm still having to say now to people. And I found that it's not moving along as quickly as I would have hoped. And AI is kind of shot past and everywhere and going. And yet this tech doesn't seem to be kind of taking. I describe it as like an airplane that's trying to get off the runway, kind of gets a few feet, then back down again. And and this is why I got into this and created my company to try and fill that gap of implementation and trying to that part of it. The technology is good, the hardware is good, the software is good, but there's good stuff out there, but it's still not happening, right? So it's just getting it moving, getting it from pilots onwards. So you've been doing this for like 38 years or something, and you're still going you're still going strong on it. So what keeps you going, and how do you feel about that?
I wouldn't necessarily say I'm still going strong. There's things that have happened at the university, which is probably a talk for another day. But it's kept me going because I think because of my background in human factors and because of the projects that we've been involved with, from the keyhole surgery simulator back in the 90s through to some of the defence projects that we've been doing in sort of search and rescue, naval gunnery, and more recently in combat casualty care. And training paramedics to keep the guys alive, to keep the guys and girls alive whilst they're being taken back to a more equipped hospital. I think because we've spent a lot of time working with the end user, very close with the end user, I think that for our project has made a difference. And certainly things like, for example, the MIST, the minimally invasive surgical trainer, that we pulled together in the early 1990s. Although that, again, it's a very long story and a project with Wolfson Foundation and NHS that we almost lost. When we went back to the drawing board and spent 4 afternoons with a GI surgeon, watching what he and his team was doing in the operating theatre, the human factors training sort of fired back in, came back into line, and what we delivered was something that wasn't in a headset, that wasn't using a glove, but was using simulated laparoscopic instruments with a screen. And because of that human-centered approach, it was the de facto trainer in Europe for 10 years. And that really said to me, well, yeah, people, and you see this on LinkedIn and online all the time, people get absolutely sweaty under the palms when people mention the new Apple Vision or the new Samsung headset that's due to come out very, very soon at quite significant money. But what I've been trying to do, I think one of the reasons why I have been, or my team's been successful, is we put the human first. And not just at the beginning, you stick with the human all the way. So you get them involved in iterative evaluations of what you do. Without that, forget it. It's a gimmick. And you've probably seen, as I have, we've turned away more surgeons who have come to us having bought a headset and wanting us to develop a quick and dirty demonstration so they can have their photographs taken for PR, that I've had hot meals. And again, we say no, unless you want us to work with you to do something serious, and let us work with you, then forget it.
Yeah. That's very interesting. It's funny. I was saying to someone the other day. I went to there was a conference and they had they have these stands or booths everywhere, and one of them had that big across the top of this guy wearing VR headset. Someone said, "Oh, you guys involved in VR?" He goes, "No, we're not. That's just a picture." And it's like people are just using it for, or you have big conferences and they have programs that come out afterwards, and on the front is they had a little thing in the corner. Or someone mentioned it for 5 minutes, but that's the selling point. People love that sort of thing.
And they do. It's funny. It's ever since I become, as I'm called on LinkedIn, the lovable curmudgeon or the grumpy prof. I don't get invited to conferences anymore, or very rarely, and I don't mind. It's just that as we saw in the 1990s, because VR almost died spectacularly at the end of the 90s, and that was because of hype and false promise, and we're still seeing that today. We're still seeing people making claims about what this technology can do. And and when it blatantly can't. And yes, AI is doing its thing. I mean, we can see it. I mean, we even see previous LinkedIn XR so-called specialists changing their title drastically to AI and VR, or AI and XR. But it's some of the problems. I think you quite rightly say some of the problems and issues we see today have been there over the last 30 years, and very little has actually changed.
So Bob, what I've got 2 questions really. First of all, I'm very interested to know what you use, whether you use any of this kind of proprietary consumer level VR XR stuff at home. But the second question is, what do you think does need to change then in order for this adoption to happen, if it needs to happen?
Well, it certainly does need to happen. I'm going to answer that question first. I mean, but I think I was talking with a guy that I'm working with on a new XR business innovative approach to ethics and business practice, and we're both agreeing that whilst you're getting people to put these things on their face, it's not going to happen. Contact lenses, possibly. AR, possibly, but it's got augmented reality. But I mean, there's so many smart glasses on the market at the moment. It's unbelievable, and the content and the data has to exist. It has to exist, which it doesn't at the moment. So I don't think there's a lot that's going to happen. Probably, I probably won't be on this planet, but I think in terms of direct neural interfaces, I think that's a must. I think that's the next step towards the Star Trek holodeck, which we'll probably never see for centuries. But it's taking away this need to wear cumbersome, iffy, and sometimes expensive and unreliable equipment that's going to involve people in a lot more adoption of this tech. I mean, at home, yes, I use a good old HP Reverb G2 headset, because it does that. If I need to demonstrate the technology, that's what we use. That's what we were using quite recently with the space project. But we also use the little Vive Flows, and I've been using the little Vive Flows, and they're not particularly brilliant in terms of field of view or resolution, but they measure your head in rotation only. But when you take stuff out to care homes and hospitals and hospices, like we've been doing, you don't want the full-blown headset. You don't want people getting out of their armchairs or the beds walking around. It does the job. And just behind the screen that I'm looking at the moment, I've got a large curved gaming screen, which is my preference, even for VR, because I'm getting quite a lot of peripheral information as well as central. So yeah, keep an eye on the tech, and some of it's quite exciting. I certainly wouldn't go out and buy the Apple headsets at the moment, because it's a headset which happens to have the Apple logo, which of course sends people dribbling on the front, and then for $3,500, that's not for me. But I do believe in this human-centered approach, and that's what we're trying to maintain, even though the university has let us down and has sadly over the last 12 months decimated my team. So my youngest son and I are doing a lot more work together now at home than I would be able to in my now non-existent lab at the university.
Okay, and thanks for that, Bob. And in terms of the healthcare space, I do recall you doing something really interesting on operations, surgical interventions, and in particular, I've lost my words, guys. You're gonna have to cut this out, unfortunately. Sorry, Atif. I just messed this bit up. My words have completely gone. When you remove a limb, and you're talking to a nurse here. What's the word I'm looking for? Amputation, right? Amputation.
Oh,
sorry.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Bob, I'll start this bit again. So, Bob, the other really interesting bit that you have, I think, have been involved in is amputation and potentially kind of phantom sensations in patients. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, well, not so much the phantom limb thing, but this is something we also demonstrated with colleagues at Torbay. When I joined university, I teamed up with the Royal Centre for Defence Medics, and what we were looking at was how we could improve the lot of the youngsters coming back from the Middle East who were obviously had stepped on an IED and were and had parts of their body blown away. That was going very, very well. In terms of not so much for amputees, but in exposing those victims to scenes of nature, actually scenes of nature, and helping them to restore themselves cognitively and to some extent physically. Now, the amputee cohort dried up, thank goodness, because obviously there are fewer people coming back to Birmingham with traumatic injuries than before. But the Defence Medical Services people said, well, you can carry on researching in this area, and now why not look at whether you can take these scenes of virtual nature, the main one being based on Wembury, which you'll know is just around the corner from Plymouth, and use that to look at physical and mental restoration. So, again, long story short, we were looking at how we could take the tech and the content that we were developing originally for amputees coming back from the Middle East and apply it in hospitals. So we're looking at using the Motomed technology, both lower limb and upper limb, to give people exercise depending on depending on the nature of their injuries, cycling around Wembury Bay, and linked it up to Spriometers. We did another demonstration again down at Tor Bay, where we had the Spriometer launching a trebuchet, firing rocks into Wembury Bay. That went down very, very well, and it was all based around Wembury. And since then, virtual Wembury, which is obviously looking quite old now, has grown immensely in terms of places. It's been used in Hawaii. It's been used in the Arctic Circle with the Canadian Defence people. It was used by the folks at Tor Bay, and it was used by Birmingham, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham, Heartlands Hospital, and this is all based on an original, very short project to look at VR to help the mental state of amputees coming back from the Middle East. So quite a successful project.
That's really interesting, and I know you have just looking at your background, you've got so many stories to tell. But we try and keep these. Maybe we'll have you on for a part 2 episode at some point. We try and keep these concise if possible. But I think people have got certainly we have got enough of a flavour of the amazing things you've done, and I know you have on your LinkedIn page you've got YouTube, some videos on. I was looking at some of the adverts from back in the day about how people used to perceive things, and not too far off actually from what it's ended up being. And you've also got things on there and videos around similar things that you said around how we need to be more kind of people-centered and ways that we can actually move this forward. Because I think there is the technology. I think there is value there, and there are opportunities there still to be kind of that we're leaving on the table just through not doing a good job of implementing this. It's been great talking to you, Professor Bob, and thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and maybe we'll have you on again. So thanks, guys.
Happy to come back for part 2, always.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.